Hey, Sarah, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. So excited to be here.
I guess we should probably start with a little bit of your backstory because you went to school for anthropology, but today we're
hmm
going to be talking about baking, a food
hmm
blog, maybe some
Yeah.
photography, social media, and a new cookbook. So, how did we get here? Because clearly we're not talking about anthropology today.
How did any of us get anywhere? It's a bunch of figuring it out as you go, I feel like. But yeah, I started off well, I mean, I feel like I kind of have to start in high school. So in high school I was really into photography. Photography was like my real first like creative passion. I would say I had always been kind of like an artistic kid. Like I did theater and I did dance and I loved like art class in general. But photography felt so special to me because it just felt like this way to flex this creative muscle but also be documenting things that were real. And I just loved that sort of intersection between like reality and art. So I did that in high school and I actually created a portfolio. I wanted to apply to art school, but at the time I was, you know, it was 2007, 2008. Being a photographer was not a very well-known career path. I didn't really feel like there was a lot of different things that I could do with it. So I ended up just going to regular liberal arts school for college. So I did my first years at NYU and I just decided to major in anthropology. I always loved the intersection of like culture and learning about different types of people and things like that. So anthropology felt like a good, I guess, like general idea for
But that
me.
sounds so interesting because you said you didn't think there was a an avenue for photography. But if I looked at the two, even in 2007, I kind of know what I would do as a photographer. I have no idea what my career path or job would be as an anthropologist. But sure, I'm with you.
I know, I know. I
It's
guess
like going
I
to school
like
for
I
philosophy or something. You know, you hear
right.
about people who go for a philosophy or even psychology, and then they just don't do that.
So I was studying bioanthro, which was like primate bones and human evolution. And so I literally like thought I was gonna like work for a museum or something. Like I just loved that, or like working in academia. But then it was like, oh my God, no, the love people who do that, not for me. So I basically went to college and I missed my mom's baking and I missed photography. And so I just decided to start photographing baked goods that I would make. It was really like as simple as that. And it was totally just a creative outlet. It was something to do in my spare time that gave me happiness. And it was never really something that I thought of as my career.
Now, was that a blog at that point, or were you just doing photographs of food and it wasn't going anywhere except like a photo album or maybe sharing on like Facebook or something?
It was a blog. So at the time it was like Broma Bakery .blogspot.com. So I like didn't have a custom domain.
I had
Um,
one of those too. Perfect Little Bites was perfectlittlebites.blogspot.com. So my
don't you
business
love
also from
that?
way back then. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, Blogspot was the place to be. So it was a blog like from the beginning. But like very, very bare bones blog. Like blogs nowadays have so much going on. This was like I'd write three random sentences that were whatever I was feeling that day and then just like post a photo and the recipe.
But don't you miss that? Like, I don't want to veer too off track, but I actually, because that's when I started and I kind of miss that. Now it's like, I get it. It's a business. You have to monetize it. There's SEO. I'm not getting into the
Yeah.
whole like, don't tell me your story, just give me the recipe. But I loved those days where I followed all these food blogs where there was a great idea and it didn't take 8,000 words. It was just like, hey, today I was in the kitchen and I started playing with kohlrabi and I decided to pickle it. And like, here's what I did. And that was it. And I loved that. And now it's become a whole very different animal. And I almost personally want to get back to just like very bare bones blogging myself.
Oh, I totally agree. It's so funny. Like, I'm sure you've seen those memes online that are like, don't tell me your 15-page like story about your grandmother and why you make this. I'm like,
100%.
wait, I wanna know that. Like, that sounds so interesting to me. Like, I love the personal stuff behind it. So yeah, I'm totally with you.
And like, so Broma Bakery, that was the name from when you started it.
That was the name from when I started.
To this day, you still carry that. I was wondering, do people think you have an actual bakery? Because to me, I hear that and it sounds like you have a place like I can come visit and come get baked goods. My business is called Perfect Little Bites, and actually now Entenmann's has a product called I think it's called Perfect Bites or Little Bites. And I get all these weird like emails and DMs, like people think that I'm affiliated with Entenmann's. I'm like, no. And they don't even understand why I do. But do people think that you have like a bakery or had a bakery and can come get
Yeah.
baked goods? Is that something that comes up?
Oh, like all the time. Well, I think now like there are a good amount of blogs and influencer pages and things like that like use those terms more loosely. But especially in the beginning, yeah, everybody was like, "Can I order something from you?" I'm like, "No, sorry." And honestly, the only reason why I called it bakery is because I'm really bad at names and like I couldn't come up with something better. Um, it is funny though. Like I get that question a lot. Like, "Oh, so do you have a physical space?" Like, no, not. Do you cook for other people? Not really. It's like it's
And once
not.
you start building brand, you're kind of committed to that.
Then
Because
you're
I've
stuck
thought
with
about
it.
that too. Again, like I have a personal chef business now called Perfect Little Bites. And that was like a spinoff of the name of my blog. And it comes from like a
Right.
story of my wife and I, like when we go out to eat, we would like make a perfect little bite and share bites. And I always said
Oh,
offhandedly
I
said if
love
I ever have a
that.
business, it would be that. But now almost 15 years in, it's like, I don't know, does that name represent exactly what I do? Does it convey it? But I've built this brand since like 2008 or 9 on that. It's like, I'm just so committed. We're going to stick with it.
That's how I feel as well. I mean, like there's something about like Broma that like I still love. I love how it sounds. I think it's like just a fun like it's a fun brand word, but the bakery part, it's like, ooh, this doesn't apply so much. But yeah, no, you're stuck with it. We're
Yeah. So you started kind of just doing other people's recipes, right? Like you were making recipes you found and then photographing, but then you evolved into doing your own tinkering. So when was that along in the process that you decided, hey, I want to actually start putting my own mark on these things?
totally. Yeah, so I would say for the first I would say for the first like 3 years when I was in college, it was very much taking other people's recipes, giving full credit, sometimes not even like writing out the recipe, just linking to their blog. Because that was always something I was very conscious of. Like I was never trying to take a recipe credit away from someone. I was just wanting to photograph it and show it in my own way. Um, and then when I got out of college, that's when I started to feel like I understood baking more. And ultimately, when I went full time, I was like, oh, okay, if I want to do this full time, I have to be making original content. So I'd had these years where I had started to become familiar with the idea of baking. And I think baking, like cooking and really like anything, it's like the more you do it, the more you develop the sixth sense and the more you understand sort of how things work. And so that was a really great way for me to become comfortable with baking as a thing and then be able to pretty easily transition that to doing my own recipes.
What's your approach? Do you have an approach or like a way you think about baking? Because there are so many people who bake. You just go online and search for a recipe for anything from a chocolate chip cookie to a white cake, and you're
Mm-hmm.
going to find a million different recipes. So, how do you
Mm-hmm.
personally approach like your style of both what you like to make, but also like how you're writing your recipes?
Love that question. I have so much to say on that question. Okay, so
Let's
first
do
of
it.
all,
Come on.
so like for people listening, I think that to have an understanding of like what happens when you search for a recipe and like why a certain recipe pops up is really important to understand. So basically, like when you type something in on Google, Google's algorithms are going to recommend to you the thing that they think that you're going to like the most. But the way that they decide if you're going to like it the most is based on constantly evolving factors. And it's kind of based on like how, among other things, how the blog post itself was written. So, for example, if you type in yellow cake, probably the top yellow cake that you're going to find is going to be like, here's my favorite recipe for yellow cake, how to make the best yellow cake. Here are the ingredients for yellow cake. What makes a yellow cake special? And they're really like, kind of like, uh, they're like doing the SEO thing, the search engine optimization thing. Like they're optimizing their site to show up at the top of Google. So that doesn't mean that it's the best recipe. It just means that the actual post itself is optimized in the way that Google thinks people want. So you have to understand that when you have these recipes that show up at the top of Google, not only is it important to make sure that they like look good from the photos, it's also really important to see how those recipes have been rated. So seeing how many ratings they have, literally going into the comments, seeing what people liked about it, what people didn't like about it. I think you can find out so much from that user like trial and error that you can then go and make little tweaks yourself. So like if everybody's saying this was so good, but there was way too much frosting, I was left with 2 cups extra frosting, then you can like kind of go down and try to have the frosting yourself or something like that. So the other really interesting thing is because so many people who are recipe developing are looking on Google to figure out how to recipe develop themselves, a lot of these recipes are very, very, very similar. And it's not necessarily because it's the perfect way of doing something. It's kind of just because everybody's looking out of the same playbook. So when I'm developing a recipe, because I've been doing this for so many years, not only am I looking at what those general structures of a recipe are, what people are looking for, but I'm then also taking my knowledge of what I know about baking, and I'm really trying to incorporate that into what already exists. So, for example, with cakes, so many people either do an all butter cake or they'll do an all oil cake. And what I've found is that there's reasons why you want to have both in your cake. The butter helps to give it really nice structure. The oil helps to keep it really, really moist. So in almost all of my yellow cakes, I'm doing half butter and half oil. And that's not necessarily something that like you find online. It's just what I have noticed through years of testing. So I'm always trying to think of like those innovative ways where I can make a recipe my own, but also really make it so it's the best it can be in this way that's still really accessible to people.
And I
that was like a very long-winded.
No, because I love this stuff. And, I talk about trusted sources a lot. When I was running, I was an executive chef running a kitchen, and, we didn't create really any recipe. I mean, we created some recipes, but my cooks would come. I'd say, we need like 4 desserts this week. Find some recipes. And they would just print off random things from the internet. I'm like, do you know where this came from? Like, this could be anything. Like some woman's like great aunt could have made this recipe. We don't know that it's good. Like, who are you trusting? Like going back to like baking, like Stella Parks, Brave Tart. Like I've used a lot of her recipes. They were great. And I would say like, go in and type carrot cake Brave Tart and see what comes up. Or, Serious Eats, whatever
Love
recipe.
Kenji. Oh my God.
Because that they've been tested somewhat, and it's not just some random person who knows how to play the SEO game and is at the top of the search, but they've actually done the work to do it. And I think that's hard, and I have twins. They're 12 years old, but my daughter loves baking, and all the time she'll say, I really want to make this. And she'll go online and just pull up a recipe. And I look at them like, I don't know, this is some random website. We've made some stuff. She had a cookbook, and, we gave it a go. We made a couple things. I'm like, this is just a not well-written cookbook. It was like an anime cookbook. I'm like, who are the people? Like, I just looked at it, and you could tell that the recipes aren't going to work, but I'm like, I'm going to be a good dad and we're going to give it a go. But like we ate them and we're like, yeah, this was not good. It's like, okay, can we please, like I have 3,000 cookbooks. Can we just like pull something from one of my books? And
I was going to say, I think that's one thing that I think is so special about cookbooks that, again, I don't think a lot of people understand. Like anybody can write a blog post and publish it online. And like you're saying, anybody can get good at SEO and get that recipe to the top of Google. Cookbooks, the whole process of a cookbook, there's so many layers of testing that goes into the recipes that make it into a cookbook because you can't change it once it's printed. And that's something that I think makes cookbooks so special. Like the recipes that are in these cookbooks are the most tried and true. So like if you are looking for the best yellow cake or the best brownies or whatever, like cookbooks are the place where you should be looking. That's at least my
Now, what's your stance on volumetric versus weigh it? Like a quarter of a cup versus 50 grams, because, a decade ago, you weren't really seeing here in America people weighing things, although we have been weighing things in the baking and pastry kitchen for a long time. But now you are seeing people at least including, not maybe exclusively going with metric and weight. But what's your thoughts on that?
I would say my thoughts are evolving. Because I'm coming from having blogged for over a decade, I also agree that primarily American audiences, they bake by volume metrics. So they're doing cups, they're doing tablespoons. I think that we're in this cool turning point now where a lot of people are starting to be more comfortable in the kitchen, feel like they can flex their muscles in the kitchen more. And so I think that weight measurements are more accurate and generally like the better way to bake. It's always a toss up for me because I want to appeal to the people who don't necessarily have that comfortability in the kitchen and they need things to be the most easy that they can be so they feel like it's the most accessible to them. So
The
that's
scale
why
is $12 on Amazon. You know, it's like
I
that's
know,
why I
but
tell
there's
people all the
something
time.
about
They'll buy a
236
$300 knife, you know,
know.
to cook, but it's like you won't spend $10 on a scale, and it's just so easy. Also, because talking about scales, I scale things a lot. So sure, you've
That
got a
makes it
recipe
helpful.
for a dozen cookies, but like, what if I want to make 6 cookies, and now it's like a
Absolutely.
quarter cup? What is half of a quarter cup? An eighth of a
Yeah.
cup? Great. That doesn't
Yeah.
exist. Like, it's just easier if it's 50 grams and now it's 25 grams. So I've been like team scale for quite a while, and I don't have a background in pastry. I'm a savory chef, and you know, it's always like
Yeah.
we don't weigh things, we cook by taste, and I've gotten over that a decade ago.
No, I think like if you are willing to buy the scale, buy the scale. Like it's going to make your life better. It's interesting though, like in this book, I only did volume measurements because I felt like that's what more people wanted. And there's so many people who have said, I want weight measurements. And so now we're like, okay, we'll include weight next time.
I'm
We
gonna
got you. But I
weigh
love
like
it.
because what I do is like when I make like a recipe from your book, even though it says a quarter cup, I'm actually gonna weigh it and make notes, and I'll put it
You
in a
just
Word
had, yeah,
document
yeah.
and
We
have
did a
that there. I actually
little,
use the Mies website, which is great for scaling.
is
So the
it?
first time I make something, I'll put it all in there, and then it scales, so you can have a recipe, and
Oh,
I can
that's
take
so
it
good.
from a dozen to 5 dozen, and it'll just scale it up. So
Oh, that's so
every
good.
time I do a recipe that exclusively has volume, I still weigh every ingredient. And that goes back to like having recipes from my grandmother, because she was, very much like to taste, like,
Of course, of
put enough
course.
pepper in it until it tastes sufficiently peppery. And it's like, what does that even mean? Is that a quarter
Yeah.
teaspoon or a tablespoon? I don't know. So on the question about scaling, I actually have a very, this is a personal, because I need to know. You have a lot of single serving desserts, which I think is amazing, and I want to talk about that a little bit. I literally actually have to make a chocolate lava cake this weekend, and I've never
Oh my
made
God,
one
stop.
before. I've never
Oh
made
my
one
God.
before, and I'm kind of nervous. And your recipe is for 2. Do you think that
Yeah.
it efficiently can be scaled up to 8 from that, and it'll all work out the same? Are we going to be good if I try this?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the book, in the there's a whole chapter of single serving desserts, and one of them is chocolate lava cakes for 2. That was actually originally a scaled up version, and we scaled it down. So it
Just
absolutely works.
send me the
Scaled
scaled
up.
up version. No.
Yeah, I'll send you the scaled up. There you
Yeah,
go.
I've never made them. And the interesting thing about working as a personal chef is, while I have my own recipes and things, sometimes customers are just dead set on something, right? It's this guy, it's my
Totally.
wife's birthday, this is her favorite dessert, and I'm like, listen, I've been cooking for like 30 years and I've literally never made one. And I don't know. You want me? So I'm executing this at a customer's house, and I've never made it before. So I'm going to do a dry run probably tomorrow to see how it works. And I saw it in your book. I'm like, this is perfect, because there's so many
Oh, I'll
recipes.
send you
And
the scaled up.
going back to comments, you read the comments, and the number one search result comes from like a New York Times recipe. I think it's a Jean Georges recipe, and all the comments are like, this is terrible. It's overcooked. Like, don't make this, or don't cook it for 12 minutes. It's 8 minutes. I'm like, I don't know that this is a recipe I want to do. So I'm going
Totally.
to try this, and I hope that you're going to be my savior this weekend, and that these people are going to love this cake.
You're gonna love it. I mean, we've made it quite a few times because we have tested the scaled up and scaled down. It's great, and it's very chocolatey. I will say too, if you have the ability to get some Dutch processed cocoa powder. Dutch processed cocoa powder is amazing in baking. It's basically cocoa powder that's been de-alkalized, so it removes a lot of that like acidity and the harsher notes of the chocolate. So basically, you just end up with a super chocolatey tasting chocolate, and for something like that, it's like next level. It just makes such
I
a
already have
difference.
that in my pantry. Who do you think you're talking to? Come
Okay.
on. Yeah, we're good. But no, what was like I mean, I love the idea of the single serving desserts. Like, when did you start playing around with that? Because, there are a lot of people who are single or it's just a couple and they don't want to make 2 dozen
Mhm.
cookies. I followed a recipe the other day and it made 2 dozen cookies. And we have a lot of people in my house, but I'm like, I don't know. Do we need 24 cookies? So when did you start kind of messing around with the single serve desserts?
I feel like I started doing them like 2.5 years ago. And the way that I approach a lot of my recipes is really taking cues from my audience and taking cues from what people are enjoying. Um, and that's like a whole other thing we can talk about. But specifically, I think I started with a single serve chocolate chip cookie, and it went viral both on TikTok and Instagram, and it went really viral like through Google searches. Like people were searching for it. So anytime something like that happens, I'm like, okay, how can I replicate this in a new way? So then we did like a double chocolate cookie. It also went viral. Then we did a single serve cupcake. It also went viral. And so just like taking those cues and being like, oh, wow, like people really need this. And it totally makes sense. It's like so many people. Okay, I'll back up. I think there's a lot of different reasons why people bake. Um, some of them are because they want to make a cake for someone's birthday, or they have a holiday celebration, or they're like doing a party or whatever it is. But a lot of people just want to bake during the week. And when you bake during the week, you don't need 2 dozen cookies. And so I think it makes total sense that having those smaller scale things are something that is really enjoyable and exciting to a lot of people, because it's like this need that people have to just have like just a little sweet treat during
Yeah,
the week.
we like every night in our like it'll be a Wednesday night at 7:30, and my wife's like, I just wish I had like a little something.
It's
Like,
just a
what can
little
we?
something sweet.
Yeah, can we make something really quickly just to take the edge off, right? A little sweet something. There's no
Totally.
pre-made dessert in the house. Like, what do we have? And I love that, and I can see why that's so popular because we do that. We sometimes just it's like Rice Krispie treats for two.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we got one of those in the book too. It's a peanut butter and fluff Rice Krispie treat. Oh my
Looks
God, so good.
amazing.
But also something I will say is if you have a recipe that you absolutely love, especially a cookie recipe, I love making full batches of cookies and then taking them and portioning them out into 3 or 4 in small Ziploc bags and then putting all of those in the freezer. So when you feel like it, you can take out 4 and then like have your 4 that you do, but the rest are still there. And it's just like the perfect way to sort of like cheat the system and get like a little dessert, but also
Amazing.
have a little dessert next week.
I want to understand because you do a lot of cookies, the whole like letting it rest versus not. A lot of people, you make your dough, roll it out, put it in the fridge. It should sit overnight to hydrate. Some are like scoop and drop.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a time? Like, how do you decide when you do those, or doesn't it matter? I mean, I know like there's spreading, right? Like if it's
Mm-hmm.
you just took it out of the mixer and you put it on the sheet tray, it's going to spread. But like, is
Mm-hmm.
there a time when you should definitely refrigerate them, whether it be a couple hours or overnight versus like a scoop and go? Because I just don't know the science of like making cookies.
Totally. So, when in doubt, do whatever the recipe says. So, if the recipe says that you should chill the cookies, chill the cookies. If the recipe says go, go. Um, the reason why some cookie recipes call for you to let them sit is, well, there's a few reasons. One is because the longer that dough sits together, the more the sugar crystals are able to break down and interact with the flour in this way that leads to like a chewier and a softer cookie. So that's lovely. Um, but also, it allows the entire cookie to like really marinate. And I know that sounds really gross, but it helps to deepen those flavors. It's almost like this tiny little bit of toasting that like happens. Like that's how I like to think about it. It's just like an enhanced flavor profile. So it can really help for something like that. And so for that reason, it's like if you have something like a brown butter chocolate chip cookie, I always, for my brown butter chocolate chip cookie recipes, will chill them because you want to enhance that toasty, warm flavor. And you get that when you let it sit. And then, of course, when you put something in the fridge overall, it's going to like firm up and get a little bit harder. So then when you go from the fridge to your oven, it's going to spread less. So sometimes recipes will call for you to put something in the fridge because without doing it, it's going to spread too much. But the ratio between the butter and the sugar and the flour is like perfect as it is. So if you added more flour to combat that, it wouldn't taste the same and it wouldn't be the best. So there's like a lot
It's
of
just so
reasons
hard.
why it
It's just so
happens.
hard because like in our house, we rarely have the forethought of like, I want cookies tomorrow,
I
going
know,
back to
I
like
know.
why the single serving. It's like a craving hits. You're like, I want cookies now. And then I'll look at a recipe. I'm like, well, this is the recipe I love, but this is supposed to sit overnight, So sometimes we'll take one of those
So,
recipes and then I'm making it for like now,
okay,
knowing
so
full well that I can't.
if you're doing that in general, like this is like very, very loose guidelines, but I would say if you really don't want to let a recipe sit, add 2 tablespoons of flour for every cup of flour that's in that recipe. That should be just about right where you can bake it off right away. It
That's an
won't
amazing
taste as
tip. Like
good,
that's the kind of
but
stuff I've never heard before. Yeah, yeah, because
yeah,
sometimes there is that really solid, like I know this is a great cookie and when I do it right, I let it sit, but I want it now. And I've never
totally.
modified that at all. So I think that's a good baseline. We've been kind of talking around it, but you have a new cookbook that will be out. I mean, this episode should drop a couple days before the book comes out. So
Oh, fun.
a book, like how, why? Clearly you have a blog with tons of recipes. But I mean, you have a great background in recipe development and obviously photography. So what made you decide though that it was the time to put it in book form?
I think people do books for a lot of different reasons, and I think every reason is valid. For me, I knew that I didn't want to do a book until I felt so supremely confident across all of the different like avenues of creating a book. So I wanted to be so confident in my photography, so confident in my recipes, so confident in my marketing abilities, and really make sure that I could create this book that I would look back in 10 years and still be really proud of. And I think because I'm self-taught, I feel like it took a long time for me to gain that confidence and be like, okay, let's like literally put a pen to paper. Like I'm ready to do this. Because I just knew that if I was going to create a book, it's a 2-year process. So I knew that I would be devoting all my time and energy to it. And I wanted it to be something that I was just so, so, so proud of and so happy with. And like a book that, could like not compete, but like a book that could compete with the best of them. So
Yeah.
that was really my reasoning. And I also felt like I got to this point where like I feel like I had something to say. I feel like there are so many incredible baking books out there. But I didn't feel like there was a baking book like this. And like this, meaning this baking book that's very about incorporating baked goods into your life and not the other way around. I feel like a lot of baking books are project bakes. So like things that take 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, things that require multiple components, things that require 12 bowls. And I wanted to create something that felt like it was something you could pick up on a Tuesday night and find 10 things that you could bake out of. So it's been an amazing process. Like I've loved it. I mean, you've interviewed a lot of cookbook authors. Like it's a lot of work and it's a lot
Yeah.
of writing and editing, but like I've loved it. I feel like coming from the social media world where you're producing like 20 pieces of content a week and just like pushing things out and then starting over and doing it again and iterating and all of this stuff, to go from that to something that feels like it's something you're chipping away at and it's something you're perfecting. Like I loved getting into that space. It was just like it was like tapping into a different part of my brain.
And, like you touched on it, but I do think you do have to a little like express how you differentiate yourself. Like, do we need another chocolate chip cookie recipe? Like, not taking anything away from you or
Right,
anyone,
right.
but like in this day and age, there's probably 4,000 of them. Like even if you put
Totally.
like a little spin on it, it's like, why should people buy this book, use this
Hmm.
recipe? I mean, the amount of cookbooks that are out there and just blogs in general, it's a ridiculous amount. So how do you convey that? Like, as you're getting ready to market this book, you have a lot of things like, yes, there's sugar cookies in there and chocolate
Yeah.
cake and all that. So how do you kind of communicate what your vibe, aesthetic, and why people would maybe pick this up and haven't seen some of these versions before? Have you thought about that like in your marketing plan?
Oh, like so much. So I think I think a lot of that sort of like why this book is something that you really tease out in your proposal. So your proposal is basically like your outline of your book, your reason for doing the book, what's going to make it different, how it's going to fit into the market. And so all of that work I've been thinking about from the very beginning when I really was just thinking about this broad idea of a book in general. And for me, within that proposal, I really wanted to nail down like what are my foundational beliefs about baking? How do I feel like I fundamentally approach baking? And how do I feel like people don't have this right now and this would fit in this way? So all really, really important questions to think about, because like if you want to create a cookbook, that's amazing, and go do it, create a cookbook. But that why is like the most important thing when it comes to translating that to marketing the book to an audience. And I think I'm in a really unique and privileged and cool space where I'm getting feedback all the time from my audience. And so it was really important to make sure that the book was an extension of the stuff that I'm already doing. But also, I think people do pick up a book for slightly different reasons than they might go online and search for a recipe. Picking up a book is definitely more of a commitment, and you're excited to bake something unique and exciting. And so I also really tried in this book to be more expansive with our flavors, be more expansive with our forms, really flex the bounds of what kind of like accessible baking can be. And I think we did. I think we did it.
You'll find
We'll
out in
see.
a
You
couple
guys will
weeks
have to
once the
say.
feedback rolls in.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's hard because I mean, I talk a lot about like having a reference point as a good thing, but you are also then being somewhat judged against other, because there is so much. Like someone makes your chocolate chip cookie, it's like, okay, this was good, but like my mom's is better, or Stella Parks is better, or I love the Allison Roman cookie, like, so in some regards that's probably hard because it's like you're making things that there have been other iterations of, but hopefully people will find one or two or 20 things in your book and be like, this is the book that I've been waiting for on baking, right? That's what we're going for.
Absolutely. And I think too, like, that's why going back to this idea of a trusted source, like that's why finding your trusted source is so important. Like you were talking about Serious Eats earlier. My husband, every time he's coming up with a dinner party menu or like a Sunday thing that he wants to cook and really have fun with in the kitchen, he always goes to Serious Eats because he trusts whatever Kenji does. Like he loves everything he creates. He trusts how he thinks, and he knows that no matter what, it's going to be good. And I think that that's also something that I was really thinking about in this book. Like, how can I make sure that with every recipe, I'm getting people to, one, trust me more as they're baking through it, and also kind of helping people to learn and become better bakers themselves. That was like a really fun thing to be thinking about as I was going through the book.
Yeah, and it's, a lot of it's nostalgic. So on the good side of like having a reference point, it's nice to kind of see these things like, oh yeah, I used to like a Hostess cupcake, right? Like I love a good chocolate cupcake that's like that, and kind of evoking those memories where it's like familiar, but like maybe even a little better or slightly different. I think that's nice because that's what I do in my business. Like I provide desserts for all my guests for a personal chef dinner, but I don't have a strong background in that. So I'm always thinking about like, what are things that are really classic that people love, and how can I just like change it a little bit? Like I do a key lime pie, but I do a Biscoff cookie crust, right? So it's not your traditional graham crust, but so it's similar enough. People know what a key lime pie is, but it's like, that's my little twist. And all you really do is change like ounce for ounce, like Biscoff cookies for graham crackers. And that's kind of my style with desserts, is keeping it pretty traditional. I do a creme brulee, but it has Krispy Kreme donuts in it. So you puree them into the base.
What?
And when you taste it, it has to be Krispy Kreme. If you use like a Dunkin', like I love my Dunkin', but even the yeasted ones are too starchy. So you puree it up and it almost dissolves in there. And when you taste it, you get that. It really evokes that like Krispy Kreme yeasted donut.
That is
so,
such a
it's
brilliant idea.
just tinkering with recipes to kind of get that thing where it's like, oh, I know what a creme brulee is. I don't have to think too much about that. But then you're like, oh shit, like this is wild, right? And now it's pawpaw season here. I live in Maryland, so now I'm incorporating that. So it's like a pawpaw Krispy Kreme creme brulee. So just like flavor stacking and adding more into it. So
I love it. Yeah, I love that style of cooking and baking. So there's a chapter in the book, and it's called Inventive Sweets. And the whole idea is taking familiar flavors, just like you're talking about, like key lime pie. In this chapter, there's things like peach crisp, and turning it into something totally different. So we're not making peach crisp, we're making peach crisp ice cream. Or we're not making lemon meringue pie, we're making lemon meringue pie macarons. And I think that that's such a fun way to both really appeal to a lot of people, but also have the people who are baking it feel, and the people who are eating it feel like, oh my God, I've never had this before. I love it. So I love those like mashup-y recipes.
I feel like this is a book I'm going to be cooking from, and hopefully it's okay. I'm going to be taking some of these and trying them out on some of my customers and see what they think.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
And then, you know, like I provide a lot of gifts. So like one of my favorite things to do, especially a couple weeks later, is like after you've had a dinner, it goes off really well. It's like put a cookbook in the mail and send it over to them. Like, hey, I really know you love this thing. Check out this book. You can find that recipe in there. And so I'll do a little extra promo there.
Sweet tooth.
Yeah. So with my daughter being 12 and loving baking, what do you think we should start with? Like if I were to just, you know, pick a couple things, like something that's, you know, easy, but she, you know, she has a good base. I mean, she made a cake covered in fondant for her birthday this year. Last year, she made these little like Japanese, like little candies with like almost like a mochi with rice flour stuffed with like red bean paste.
She knows her stuff.
So we do like, she's very more into the decorative. Like when we're like making something, I'm like, I don't know that I want to do this. She's like, yeah, we're going to do a jelly roll cake. I'm like, okay. So let's say we're going to do like amazing. 2 or 3 things from the book. Do you have anything that you think would be like fun to tackle?
Yes. Okay. So the first thing is lunch lady brownies. These are so good. It's a sugar bomb, but like in the best way. So it's a brownie that you make in a sheet pan. And then when it comes out of the oven, you put this very thick icing on top, and the icing melts so perfectly over the brownies where it develops this like shiny top. It's so good. It's so good. Okay. These are super easy, but they're absolutely delicious. And it's the fall. Spiced pumpkin snickerdoodles. Oh my God. Ooh. Like so easy. Take a snickerdoodle, but like add pumpkin, add a little bit of cinnamon, add a few more spices.
Actual like pumpkin in there, like canned pumpkin?
Actual pumpkin. And this is another one of those, like, you won't find this in a lot of recipes online because we like just kind of like stumbled our way into figuring it out. A lot of times when you add pumpkin to cookies, the cookies will end up being way too puffy because the combination of pumpkin and egg, it's too much fluffy stuff. So what you do is you take out the egg white. So it has, I think it's something like 1/3 cup of pumpkin puree in it. Like it's a good amount. First, you squeeze out some of the liquid. I literally just suggest putting it in like a, what's it called? In a paper towel.
Like a strainer.
Yeah.
Cheesecloth.
Strainer's too complicated. We're paper towel people over here.
Paper, okay.
But literally just like squeeze out just teensy bit. And then instead of using a whole egg, you just use the egg yolk. So the egg yolk helps to bind everything together, but you don't get that puffiness. So you end up with this really like delicious pumpkin cookie that still has a really nice chew and density to it. That one's, oh my God. It's so good. And then, let's think if she like really wants to like flex her muscle.
Something to impress friends.
Okay. Well, this one's wild. It's a baklava cheesecake. So obviously with cheesecake, you usually do a graham cracker crust. Instead, in this cheesecake, you take phyllo dough and you basically paper mache it all over your cheesecake base. So you get this like really crispy, crunchy, crackly phyllo dough as your base and then up the sides. You do your cheesecake. It's just a normal honey vanilla cheesecake. And then bake it. Once it comes out, you add this honey walnut pistachio topping to it. So you get this really nice crunch on top. And it's, again, like one of those mashups. It's like you've had baklava, but you haven't had it in cheesecake. And it's so good.
Amazing. Taking 2 of the best desserts out there and combining them into one. Yeah.
Oh my God, I love talking about dessert.
Like, I I could go one by one through these and
Yeah.
ask for all your tips on them. One thing I wanted to touch on quickly is like you had your food photography course, which you're
Yeah.
not doing anymore. Can you talk about that a little bit and kind of specifically like the decision to close it? Like, I guess I'll lead in with, I heard you talking on another podcast about like you were helping people kind of build and grow their own thing, but you
Yep.
felt that at the end of the day, you weren't really doing what you loved, right? Like you weren't serving
Exactly.
yourself. And this is something that I'm
Yeah.
dealing with because I'm a personal chef. I started this podcast in this community. I love it. But I'm
Yep.
talking to you right now and I'm essentially helping you build your brand and promo your stuff and get your work out.
Totally.
And I'm like right now should be answering emails about like
Yep.
a
Yep.
dinner for
Yep.
my business and
Yeah.
marketing my business and like walking that balance. So it's something that really struck me that like, yeah, I totally see that. Like I did this thing and it's successful for
Mhm.
me, but I kind of am taking my eye off the ball here and I
Mhm.
really need to be focusing on my business. So, I'm not doing away with the podcast and the community. So I don't know, maybe that's a roundabout way of saying like, can you talk about your food photography thing? And then also the
Totally.
decision to
Totally.
like
Yeah.
not do that.
Yeah. So I basically started. It started out as a course, and I called it Foodtography School. And I started this course in 2017, and it went super super well. And so basically, I expanded the course into a business. So we ended up with. I always forget if it was like I think it was either 8 or 9 employees, but like we had a lot of lovely people working together. And it turned into a series of courses. We had like 5 or 6 courses. We had presets. We had downloadable templates and guides. We were doing free classes for people. Like it was basically just like an educational school where you could pick and choose and learn a bunch of different things. So we had like a course on iPhone photography. We had an advanced course. I did a mastermind at one point. We had like a influence, which was like a social media course. All of these different things. And it was like I would be a different person today if I had not done that. I learned so much from running my own business with multiple employees, learning how to manage, learning how to delegate, learning how to do sales and marketing and speak to an audience and how to iterate. Like I learned so much. And so like I would never change it. And I also feel so proud of how many people's lives we changed. And I know that sounds so sappy, but like we really did change how food photography and food blogging was. Like we helped so many people's careers and feeling like they had the confidence and had the knowledge to be able to do that. I did feel like as time went on and I saw my personal brand growing and growing and growing and growing more rapidly over time, that I was starting to lose the time and energy that I knew that I should be devoting to my own brand. And so really it was a decision that I feel like other people might have felt differently, but like ultimately I loved teaching, but my ultimate goal is not to be a teacher. I want to be doing what I'm doing now. I want to have this baking platform where I'm helping people learn how to bake. I'm bringing joy to their lives in that way. I'm building my own personal brand. I'm writing cookbooks. Like that's just ultimately what I wanted to be doing. And so it was really just a decision about like, do I give my own brand the space and the energy necessary to do this, or do I kind of let that slip away and keep focusing on helping other people, so like it was like it was a hard decision, but it was kind of like the entire point of photography school was like helping other people with their brands, and I had to reflect and be like, now help yourself.
No, 100%. But it's good because you did touch on that. Like the side roads then also help you go back into your own thing, because I started this as like, I started my personal chef business and people all the time, hey, can I buy you a coffee or a beer and tell me how to do this because I want to do that. And I was like, oh, well, this isn't a great use of time. Why don't we have an online like Facebook group. And then, we're at like
Right?
2,000 members now. And that's like, why don't you have a podcast? And then it's
Yep.
globally scalable and you can tell people how to do this. And then it just grows beyond what I thought it was going to be. It's like, I don't know. I can't put this back in the box at this point. And like,
Yeah.
I'm getting 15 requests a day for personal chef dinners, but like I have an interview to do and a
Totally.
podcast to produce. It's like, I need to think about like where the energy needs to go. And I don't have anyone who helps me with anything. I've never had an employee for either my chef business or the
Whoa.
marketing and podcast. So I'm like, today I'm doing 2 podcast interviews. I'm editing to release a show that comes out tomorrow. I'm prepping for a party that is on
Oh my
Saturday.
God.
And I have a networking event today for 2 hours from 4:30 to 6:30. So it's like, I'm super stretched. And you're like,
Yeah.
at some point it's going to break.
And it's tough
and
because-
need to refocus a little bit, but you throw a little at the
Yeah.
wall and see what sticks. And then sometimes you just have to say like, I can't do this anymore. It's not worth the time. It's not even worth the money if I were to hire someone, and we're just, it served its purpose for a time and we're going to move on, and sometimes knowing when that is.
Exactly. But it's tough because like, I'm sure with the podcast, it's like, you feel like maybe people are relying on you doesn't like fit as much, but like people love what you're doing and people want to hear from you. And so it's then hard to be like, so let's stop. Like it's this weird thing where like people are asking you for more and you really have to like sit back and be like, oh gosh, like what
But I
is best
enjoy it.
for
I
me?
mean, I love, as someone who works by themselves now, I miss the camaraderie of people in a kitchen and having people to talk to. So I love it. It's when I don't enjoy it that I'm not going to do it anymore. So sitting down and talking to people and getting their takes on things and, it's education for me. It's like, oh, this person's doing this thing. This works for them, So a lot of it, I think you have to be a little selfish in your interview questions and kind of get out kind of what is really interesting to you. Also, like,
Totally.
you don't need to go on 20 podcasts this week and talk about the same thing. I'm sure you have so much to say. And at some point when you do a lot of interviews, it gets almost like boring, right? It's like, do I have to tell the same anecdotes over and over again?
Yeah. No, but I think that the most important thing that I have taken out of it is that like I wouldn't change it. And I do think like if you're somebody that like you're struggling between two things or like or you feel like you're balancing between things, I think there's a lot of like self-criticism about like, well, you shouldn't have done it this way or like you shouldn't have even whatever. Like all these shouldn't have. So with like this very like hindsight mentality. And I really feel like you said, like you're learning things in the podcast all the time and you're having fun with it still. And like, it's great that you're doing it. I think it will become clear when you're like, okay, I'm good. And I think that just that listening to your gut is so, so important. And it's like when that voice is saying like, I think it's time, like you have to listen to that.
And I think, I'm someone who does enjoy like looking back on things and seeing the road to where you got. It's like I did this catering event. Notoriously, it was the worst event I ever did. And it was horrible and I hated it and I would never do it again. But it was a collaborative
Wait,
event.
Why?
It was just not well planned. It was like year one of doing an event. There was no money. I was doing it for free. Supposedly it was all this like media that was going to be there and it ended up being like influencers, but they weren't even like good influencers. There were people with like 5,000 Instagram followers and it was like on a boat and I'm like schlepping stuff down like a long pier and onto a boat cooking for a bunch of like entitled like 20 somethings. So annoying.
The worst.
But one of the people there has turned into one of my closest friends in the chef community and just personally. And he's been on my podcast a number of times and we hang out. And I just go back to like, I wouldn't have met him had I not done this event because he was also involved in that, right? So you can't have one without the other. It's like people ask would you go to culinary school again? It's like, well, like, no, but also I met my wife there and I met my best friends there, right? So it's like, you can't remove it. Should you go? Like, I have opinions on that. But for me, it's like some of the best things in my life came out of that. And you can't have one without the other. And I just think, go through life and experience it as it is. And cool things are going to come out of things and maybe look for the silver lining. And, it is what it is.
Yeah, I totally agree.
You have grown an immense following online, right? Like, I mean, there's people with, decent followings, but you have just like TikTok and Instagram over 2 million followers, which seems insane. I don't know how you see that. So I have so much I want to ask about that. So many people who listen to my show are in the content creation space and do this kind of stuff. I guess one of the things is like, how do you see that and do you stay connected, right? Because I think a lot of people, especially as they get big followings, maybe they were really engaging, they were answering comments, they were talking to people. And then, I'm sure it's super hard. Like, you can't answer every comment, DM, whatever. What's your take on that now? Like, I guess your relationship with your community in social media when you have that many people following you.
Yeah. So I think that one of the reasons why I have such a strong community is because I devote so much time to comments and DMs. And it is a total slog to be sitting on your phone for hours just answering people over and over again, like iterations of the same thing. But I think it is one of the most important things to do if you're looking to grow a community and if you're looking to grow a strong community. As an influencer, you are someone who people look up to. And so to be able to then connect with that person who you look up to on a personal level, it strengthens that connection so, so much. It's such a small thing for you to just respond to somebody one sentence, and it makes someone's day. So I feel like it's so important to do, and it's really annoying to do it day after day after day after day. But like I truly owe the strength of my audience to doing that.
Yeah, I mean, you have, I don't want to say you have nothing without them, right? But like you've built your whole business on sharing your stuff and people being interested in the stuff you share.
Yeah, I think similarly, content creation is also such a slog. Right now I'm producing 5 videos a week that then get syndicated across all the different platforms. And that's in addition to full on blog posts, but these, 5 reels and TikToks, that is so time consuming. I'm taking 2 full days to shoot all of those videos. And I'll find myself being like, oh my God, I just wish I didn't have to do this. But then immediately I'm like, but this is the reason I can do everything else I do. So I really think of content and those videos that you create, that's the top of your marketing funnel. And without that, you can't do everything else that comes with, having a following and having that influence. So I would also say it's so important to consistently create content. Not only are you consistently creating it for your audience and for being good to the Instagram algorithm gods and things like that, but you're also going to be getting better with every single time you do it. And you're going to be learning how to do things better and learning how to do things more efficiently. And you're going to be improving the more and more that you do it.
I think it's both interesting and exhausting, kind of learning, the platform. It's you take one video, it's can I share the same video on YouTube Shorts, TikTok, and Reels? Or what do people respond with? Do I need to change the first 3 seconds? Do I need to change the caption, the hashtags? And you're wow, this video only has 56 likes on Instagram, but has 200,000 views on TikTok. I don't understand what's happening here.
And I will say, I share the same video to Instagram as I do to TikTok, as I do to YouTube Shorts. I think that if I were producing way less content, I would be a little bit more strategic with that first 3 seconds, because on Instagram, your video is primarily going out to your audience before it goes to anyone else. On TikTok, it's really going out to the world. So the way that you speak to the world is going to be different than the way you speak to people who already know you. But the way that I've sort of combated that is really just trying to make sure that whatever I'm doing, it's the most universal that I can. So I'm not going to start something off with well, my favorite something is this. It's no, you don't know. And just really keeping that sort of going out to this broad audience in mind and top of mind.
I think that's a great tip. And I'm sure that's rattling around in the heads of some of our listeners out there, as they're always, so many people are always asking me. I'm like, listen, I'm not the one with 1 million followers. I'll just tell you what works for me and what I found doesn't work. I hate to be already
I talk about social media all day.
Yeah, I know.
No, I mean,
I hate to be what's next, but your book isn't even out as we're talking. But where, what do you have planned? Do you have anything cooking besides the book and just getting the book out there? Or are you already a couple steps ahead?
I am currently planning book 2. Because again,
Of
books are a
course.
2-year process. So it's like, I
Yeah.
gotta start that now. So I can't talk about specifics, but I do have a book 2 in the works, which is really exciting. Then I keep saying this. I literally haven't done anything with it. I've just said that I wanted to do it for like literally years. I think it would be so fun to start a food company, like making like cookie dough or something like that people can buy and then just bake off. I just feel like it would be so fun and I would love to do it, but I also feel so overwhelmed. I'm like, I have too many things to do.
You have to prioritize. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, especially with creating so much content, I'm like, I don't have time to do anything else. Like, I just
I
gotta
know
keep doing this.
that's the biggest thing. And I'm sure this could be like a long answer, but like, when do you feel like someone should hire someone to help them, whether they're just creating content or
Yeah.
doing something? Like, when is the point where like, I feel like I got something here. I'm getting a following. I've got a lot of things I want to do. I don't know. Is it worth money to pay for someone? Like,
Mhm.
when did you bring on the first person, or even in hindsight, like, when do you think someone should maybe consider hiring help?
Um, there's definitely no right answer to this because every situation is going to be different. I will say for myself, um, I've hired people for 2 different reasons. The first reason is when I am doing things myself and I'm finding that I'm getting bogged down in the busy work. So, for example, I just moved from Boston to New York. In Boston, I have a girl who works full time for me. She still works full time for me, but when we would have shoot days, she would be assisting in the kitchen. When I moved to New York, I didn't have her. And so for the first 2 months, I was shooting videos by myself. And what used to take me 3 hours was taking me 6. So that's like right there. If you find you're getting bogged down and your time is not being spent on sort of like the things that only you can do, um, that's when I think it's really important to hire someone. So like if you are private chefing and you're taking a half a day to like wash dishes, I don't know, but like and you
Yeah,
are the
no,
owner of your
it takes
business,
a lot of time to
and
wash dishes. Let me
yeah,
tell you.
like if you feel like you taking that half day could be spent elsewhere building your business in some way, I think that's a really important time to hire. I will also say with that, um, that doesn't necessarily mean like you're like rolling in it and you're like, oh yeah, I have so much money I could hire someone. Um, but I think it's really like important as long as you're being really strategic about like making sure that it's the right move. It's really important to remember like as soon as you hire someone to do that busy work, it frees you up to do the building that's going to make your business bigger. So you can't think about it monetarily in terms of like, I need to wait until I have so much money to hire. Like if you have any wiggle room at all and you're seeing yourself being bogged down, like I recommend hiring out. I've just found that like every time I've done it, it's only made my business bigger.
Yeah, as long as you're not using that extra time to like Netflix and chill, right? Like, oh, now I don't have to
Exactly.
do this stuff. I can
Yeah.
just sit back.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
I
keep your
think
workday solid.
the idea of thinking about what your zone of genius is really important. So this is just like this marketing business concept. I don't know. And it's
No, I
basically
love
like,
that stuff. I follow that stuff all the
okay,
time.
cool. It's like what is the thing that you do that nobody else can do? What is the thing that makes you special? And if you are only spending like 10% of your time doing that and the rest is like responding to emails or doing cleanup or like going grocery shopping, like you're not going to be able to get to that next level. You have to find ways that you can be in that space more. Um,
Oh yeah,
so
100.
yeah,
I was just talking to someone the other day about like Instacarting, and they're like, I would never let someone else pick out my stuff. I'm like, what's the worst that
game
can happen? Like,
changer.
I'm spending
Game
6
changer.
hours a week like grocery
Yeah.
shopping. Like, if you have
Yeah.
one gig, cool. But like, I don't care. It's a cucumber. Like, whatever. Like, if theirs
My
is
mom's
like
the same way.
90% as good as mine, go.
It's
But like
gonna
the
be
speed,
okay.
like yeah, I love when I open the app and like, you saved 782 hours by using Instacart. I'm like, cool, money well spent, because I can do
Yeah.
those other things. Yeah, and it's not something that everyone agrees with me on. I'm like, cool, like go to 800 farmers markets and hand select every single piece of produce. Like, good luck getting more leads and handling them
Yeah,
because like
totally.
you're not going to have the time to do anything. Yeah.
The other thing I would say about hiring is, I don't know. To some people, this may be like, duh. But I do think it's really important to hire for the person and not the role. I think that especially in a business like being a chef without a restaurant, where it's this like weird kind of like startup-y mentality when you have to do a lot of different things. It's really important to make sure that the person you're hiring has the like skills that make them adaptable, that make them self-sufficient, that make them anticipatory. All of those things are going to be the important things to search for as you're hiring, not the person who like had the perfect culinary background or like, staged at the best places or whatever it is. I've learned that as I've hired, I don't know, like 15 or so people throughout the years. And it's always the people who I'm hiring who have those qualities that I'm able to turn their position into something bigger, or they're able to grow into a different position, or they're able to like be multifaceted and do a little of this, but also take on a little bit of this. And that's, I think, so helpful for being in the business that we're in.
And that takes a while. And it's hard if you've never done that. I mean, I come from a corporate food service background where, my last job, I had 100 people under me. So I'm very versed in like interviewing and hiring. Like, I'm so glad I don't have that anymore. But you do get very good at like talking to people in an interview, and your BS detector comes out. It's like, okay, they're here with a 4-year culinary degree, but they seem like they're going to be an a-hole in the kitchen. Like, this is not what I'm going for. So, having that helps.
Okay.
Well, go ahead.
I just have to share this.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So like one last thing I will say about hiring someone is I start with, whenever I'm hiring someone, I use a Google form and like I have people fill out and, answer questions. I make sure that in every single application that I put out that I have one personality question. And that can be like, who's your favorite celebrity food chef? Who's your least favorite celebrity food chef? If you could be a dessert, what would you be? And those questions are so helpful in figuring out like what type of person that person is. So I would highly recommend like make sure you put a little personality question into whenever you hire someone.
Oh, I love that. I have done that before, and I hate when you get these generic, like I'll just be like, what are your favorite culinary resources? Like, where do you get your inspiration from? And they're just like, the internet.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
But then you're like, cool, you're not my person.
Right.
Like,
I want to hear that
figure it
like
out.
culinary artistry is my favorite book, or I love watching this chef or this person's Instagram, but they're just like very broad. I'm like, are you even interested in this business? Like that's, you're not telling me anything.
So much.
Who's yours? Like, who is there anyone who you love as like someone in the baking or, world that you kind of, I don't want to say aspire to be to, but like look up to, or have used their recipes a lot, especially in the earlier days?
Yeah. So many people. But I think a few. I think Dory Greenspan's recipes are absolutely incredible. I also love her vibe. This was like a pinch me moment. She blurbed my book and I was like, oh my God.
It's very cool.
I love you so much. So I think she's so good. Like I just love her. I also think Claire Saffitz has done such a good job at building her brand outside of Bon Appetit, where she came from. I just think it's been really cool to watch her trajectory. And then honestly, I think Martha Stewart is brilliant. Just the fact that she has been so of the moment throughout so many decades, I think is incredible. Like even her rebranding herself when she came back from jail, like I think she's so cool. I
love that because like she's not someone who I would naturally have an affinity for, like the old day, like seems kind of like stuffy and overly whatever, and now it's like, oh, she can get down with like Snoop Dogg and is like totally yeah, she's like your cool grandmother, and so I love that. And she hasn't stuck to this very kind of formal, overly decorated style, because I don't connect with that at all. And you're like, oh, okay, she's kind of letting loose a little bit.
She's adapting. And I love that.
Is there anything you feel like we did not get into today that you want to just get out there before we leave?
No, I feel like we had a great chat.
Well, awesome. I do want to say that I am in Maryland. I'm close to DC. I know you're rolling through the DC area on a tour. I believe it's like October 10th. I'm hoping to make it out there. I know that's a Thursday, so I don't have
Oh
anything
my
on my
God.
calendar, so would love to come to DC and
That would
connect
be
and
incredible.
see you in
If you
person.
can't, I totally get it, but that would be a pretty cool full circle moment.
Nice. Well, so many of our listeners, I got my start here in the DMV, and a lot of them are listening. So go check that out. I'll link all that in the show notes. You'll be able to find her. But I think it's at Bold Fork Books, if
Yep,
I'm
Bold
correct.
Fork Books,
Yeah, they host
October
a lot
10th.
of
You got it right.
host a lot of things there. Yeah. Cool. Well, I hope to see you there. The book looks amazing. I'm gonna start baking from it ASAP, and
Let me know
I'll
what
let you
your
know. I'll send
daughter
you a link.
thinks.
Yeah,
She's
I'll take
she's the one I'm looking
pictures.
out for.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on the show. I had a great conversation with you today.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure to talk to you, and looking forward to seeing you in DC, hopefully.
Yes, yeah. And to all of our listeners, this is Chris with Chefs Without Restaurants. Thanks so much for listening and have a great week.